Hello and welcome to episode 160 of Magic Rays of Light, a podcast exploring the world of Apple TV and so much more. I'm your host, Devon Dundee. I'm joined by Sigmund Judge. How's it going, Sigmund?
It's going well. Busy week, right? How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm having a lot of fun this week keeping up with all the news out of South by Southwest. We're going to sprinkle little bits of it here and there throughout the episode. But I wanted to start with this really interesting conversation we got to see from South by Southwest between Ben Stiller and Apple's Eddie Q. And I'm not going to call it an interview because it felt like much more of a back and forth. If you couldn't really tell who was interviewing whom because they were both asking each other questions. But I thought it was a really fascinating conversation, not only about severance, of course, which is what everyone's talking about, but also about Apple and how they approach originals. Did you get to check out that conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was fantastic. And I will say something that we've been aware of privately for a little while is that Eddie Q has been hosting a lot of these conversations over on Apple Campus at private events for employees. I, for a long time, thought, look, I think it's very cool and it's a nice perk, but it would be really cool to see like an up-and-coming presenter or an interviewer be given these opportunities. I have completely changed my mind on that. I just hope that this role is something that we see publicly from Eddie Q more often. This was just really, really special. Lots of back and forth, lots of humour. Were there any particular moments that stood out for you? Because for me especially, I did enjoy, with all of the talk that had been about Severance and the budget of Severance Season 2, there was one particular moment where Ben Stiller kind of called it out and said, hey, is everything going okay at Apple right now? Which is a reasonable question to ask, something we'll be talking about a little bit later. Because each time, we need to increase the budget a little bit, I get this call and basically saying, hey guys, like, what are you doing? So, is everything okay? And of course, Eddie reassured Ben Stiller that everything is going okay and will be, provided Ben Stiller and his team keep up the good work.
Yeah, I thought that moment was awesome. It's kind of making light of things that we've heard reported about the production of season 2, right? And I think that seeing that played out in that way was kind of cathartic, and just knowing that everything's good there in that relationship, and we can rest assured that things are going okay. I loved kind of the glimpses behind the scenes of Apple's approach to their originals. Ben Stiller talked a little bit about some of the team that he works with and how some of those bonus features for Severance the first season came together. The Lexington letter, and then for the season, the UUR, how that idea actually came from Apple's side and then came to the creator of the show, Dan Erickson, who wrote those things, and then it got published. That was cool. But then hearing Eddie Q talk about Apple's approach to originals and how they're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks, right? Apple's output, we've talked about this before, it's increasing, but it's not particularly high in comparison to other streamers, and that is very intentional. And the thing that Eddie Q said that really stuck to me was he said they all need to be hits. And to me, that it speaks to the seriousness with which Apple considers every project. We talk about everything on this show that comes out on Apple TV Plus. Some of them are big hits with us, some of them aren't so much, but from Apple's point of view, when they invest in and choose a project and put their name on it, that means something. And hearing that come out of Eddie Q's mouth and pronounced and enunciated that way, I just thought that had a weight to it that speaks to what Apple's doing and also puts the work that we're doing, I think, in a different light, just in terms of what each of these originals mean to Apple and the investment that's going into them. So I thought that was a really interesting glimpse into what they're doing and why the library is building up slowly, and it is building, and there definitely are some hits there, but just the way that Apple's so invested in each project.
I also thought it was really interesting to hear kind of the comparisons, right, between how Apple ship a product and the pressure environment around that, from software and hardware, and comparing it to the production and pre-production of an Apple original. I thought that was a really, really interesting take, and it's a 40-minute conversation, very open, very frank. Eddie Q even tried to kind of spoil the finale, even though he promises he's not seen it yet for Severance, and Ben Stiller was not biting.
I'll just say, if I had access to the last 2 episodes of Severance at this point, I would have already watched them. I may not say that publicly, but I would have already watched them. I can't imagine holding back, but it's definitely a conversation worth checking out for fans of Severance and Apple TV Plus in general. So we will link that in the show notes, and we encourage you to check it out. For this week's episode, we've got a lot for listeners. We're going to recap Prime Target. We're going to share our ideas for Apple Intelligence features on Apple TV. But we're going to start with our highlight of this week's premiere of Apple Original series, Dope Thief. 2 lifelong friends in Philadelphia pose as DEA agents to rob small-time drug dealers. It's a perfect grift until they choose the wrong mark and become targets of a massive narcotics enterprise.
I'm going to explain to you what we do. We're posing as feds. We were ripping off drug dealers. But we went to the wrong house.
These guys are gonna come after us, man.
We can't just run. You got Sherry. I got Teresa.
This isn't us. We weren't killers.
The only people that can stop this is me and you.
This series is created and executive produced by Peter Craig. It's also executive produced by Ridley Scott, who directs the first episode. It's based on Dennis Tafoya's book of the same name, and it stars Brian Tyree Henry, Wagner Moura, Marin Ireland, Kate Mulgrew, Nesta Cooper, Amir Arison, Dustin Nguyen, and Ving Rhames. Sigmund, tell us a bit about Dope Thief.
Wow. This is, of course, the action crime comedy thriller that has been touted, and really is everything that I'd hoped for from this and much more. Brian Tyree Henry, I think every time we've spoken about him as a talent, we've just sung his praises, because he literally do anything, I think, and bring meaning and gravitas to it. And of course, Wagner Moura, Brian Tyree Henry as Raymond, Wagner Moura as Manny. They're 2 lifelong friends. We start with them staking out a small-time drug dealer on his front porch as they assess the risks involved before their DEA bust, which ends with them neutralizing the threat of one young dealer and what appears to be a house run by kids. One is playing on a video game. The other final threat is neutralized from upstairs and ends up being like an 11-year-old boy brandishing a handgun. There is this authoritative voice that Brian Tyree Henry's character uses that, beyond the kind of sparkle of the back and forth between the 2 characters, starts to break and give the first clues to Raymond's character, but also to what's actually going on, because neither of them are actually DEA agents, but they are 2, small-time stick-up artists that are merely playing dress-up in what is really, I guess, a modern-day Robin Hood fable, and we get to learn a little bit more about them, and there is a very Robin Hood type vibe to this, voyeuristic ride-along where 2 guys are getting the best of the criminal underworld. And the way it normally goes with these kind of things, either an addict or a small-time grifter turns into this criminal overlord. That is not what this is, and that's why I find it quite refreshing. It is 2 people that discovered a small-time grift. For many, many reasons, they've decided to target drug dealers and small-time drug dealers in particular. But when that small-time grift becomes something a little bit bigger, because, of course, these things always do, you get a little bit more elaborate with your ideas, they really come unstuck. And rather than believe that a character's going to grow in a certain way, we are at a point in these two characters' lives where they'll still learn, but their characters are developed and their characters are very much the product of their upbringings and their traumas. So this is a really, really special show. Very funny, hilarious at times, I would say, in some of the comedic delivery. Very fun, action-packed. But think of it a little bit like a slasher film. And there is a slasher element here, where one of the criminal overlords that is continuously chasing them has that gravelly voice where he pretty much says everything other than, what's your favourite scary movie, if you get my drift. They are very much like two characters in a scary movie. So how we would react in a situation where someone is shot and the trauma that we would take on from that, whether they were good or bad, that's explored here as well.
I hadn't thought about it in terms of a slasher film until just hearing you bring that up, but I think that's a really good way of looking at it. There's a moment in the first episode where everything just goes completely wrong, right? They've done this thing dozens of times. There's a formula to it, and that formula gets completely broken, and Ray and Manny just look at each other trying to figure out what to do, and just the trauma, the shock in their eyes, and then their reaction to return to the formula, right? To try to get back to the way that you would normally handle this situation. I think that very much speaks to the way that things play out in horror movies a lot of times. You don't make the smart decision, you just make the thing that is most comfortable to you, or that, you know, maybe seems right in that moment, even though if it's not going to work out for you long term. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to look at it that way. And I agree with you also on the humor of it. I was not expecting to laugh during this show, but the dynamic between Raymond and Manny is so funny in the van as they're like talking about, you know, the plan, and, you know, Ray's kind of getting himself hyped up for that voice. Yeah, there are some moments of levity before I'd say it spins off into that almost horror genre. But I agree with you. I think it is very special. I love the two characters, the complexity of them, even in this first episode. You know, these are guys who are doing something very risky, but they're not people with nothing to lose. And so there's stakes involved for both of them. And that's something that I think is kind of refreshing for this kind of genre as well. You think about something like Breaking Bad, where really you're watching someone with nothing to lose just making these very erratic decisions because there's nothing on the other side of it. These guys are not in that situation. They're driven to this point out of need. They're trying to provide for people they love, and having people you love is definitely an issue in this kind of work, right? And I think that's something we're going to see as it continues.
And I think is a big plot point in this with regard to some of the characters, right? We talk about Raymond and Manny a little bit, but honestly, I feel like it's a little bit overshadowed by the relationship between Brian Tyree Henry's Raymond and Kate Mulgrew's Teresa, who is basically Raymond's adoptive mum and the girlfriend of his estranged father who's in prison. And that's really interesting as well. You know, when you've got so little, and we find out a little bit about the trauma behind, you know, what happened with his own mother, and then later on with his girlfriend, and the fact that he's actually dealing with his own addiction issues as well. We haven't even mentioned that, you know, a real DEA agent gets involved very early on in this, and so you've got a biker gang on the chase, you've got a Mexican cartel on the chase, and you've got the DEA involved as well, who don't quite know at first that their name's being exploited in the name of this grift. And all the pieces really come together quite well. It's an 8-episode miniseries, so there's a beginning, middle, and end to this, and yeah. This is a show also that, I don't know, what are your feelings after the first episode? Is this one that you're going to hold off a little bit and binge, or is this a week to week? Because based on some of the reviews that came out last week for this show, I can kind of tell which critic did what.
I think this one's going to work better for you week to week. I only watched the first episode. I haven't even seen the second one because the first one was just, it's a lot, and you need time to take that in, process, absorb it. I don't think this is a show that you necessarily want to immerse yourself in for like 8 straight hours, because I just don't know that you're going to feel great afterwards, not knowing anything about the way the plot goes. I just mean, the trauma of it and the heaviness and the intensity. I just feel like this is one that's going to be better stretched out. It's good to stay on your edge of your seat for a week and kind of wonder what's going to happen. So that's the approach I'm going to take. Did you take the more binge approach to it?
I tried to take a week to week. I will say this is a show that's so compelling that if there is an extra episode, you're going to want to jump into it, I think. Right? That is from my perspective. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this already. The show really has some early HBO vibes. It's almost, I'd call it almost like an early 2000s nostalgia piece, even though it's not presented that way. I say that because of the music. I say that because of the slightly drab color palette and the edit, which is fast and at times overwhelming. By no means are either of those a negative. And I just really enjoy that kind of, settling on something for a week and then going back to it. As I said, I can tell by the critics who binged and those that took their time. And those that take their time, I think are going to get a lot more out of this show than just a run-of-the-mill crime caper. So yeah, Dope Thief, premiering globally this Friday on Apple TV Plus with its first 2 episodes. Its first, again, directed by the great Ridley Scott. Yeah.
You mentioned the way the show kind of feels like a 2000s throwback. I think there's a little bit of a timelessness to it so far, just in terms of there's not a lot of technology in it. We get a lot of sci-fi and stuff like that on Apple TV Plus. This one doesn't have any of that. So there's no like AI boom involved in this show, at least not so far. But there was a lot of conversation this week about AI, especially around Apple Intelligence, given that it was announced that personalized Siri has been delayed. The feature of Apple Intelligence where it's going to be able to take into account your personal context, that combined with app intents from different apps, it's going to be able to put all those pieces together to do very complex things for you based on your data. Apple announced that last year at WWDC. We were expecting it to come this spring, and now it has been revealed that it will be coming in the coming year, which a lot of people are surmising that's going to mean as part of iOS 19 rather than as part of iOS 18. And there's also some rumor swirling that could impact Apple's smart home display release because it's going to be relying on some of those personal context features from Siri as well. So a little bit of software impact, a little bit of hardware impact. But given all the conversation around Apple Intelligence, we thought we'd put our little Apple TV spin on it and try to take more of a positive future view. As we're waiting and trying to be patient, waiting for those features, we thought we would try to maybe predict, maybe wishcast, maybe a little bit of both, how Apple Intelligence could be played out on the Apple TV and some features we'd like to see there when Apple Intelligence comes to the platform. So we're going to have 3 picks each. We're going to order them from most likely to most Dreamcasty, start practical and maybe move towards the fantastical. But I think we've got some fun picks here to share, just to think about what Apple Intelligence could mean long-term for our TV viewing experiences. So to start, just before we start with our picks, I want to ask you, Sigmund, I think we're on the same page here, but just to make sure, do we believe that the next iteration of Apple TV hardware will be capable, at least, of running Apple Intelligence, even if it's not in tvOS from the start?
If it's not, I'll be incredibly sad because I've been thinking about this for so long. Beyond, the week where we're building up towards this episode. I just feel like anything that comes now from Apple needs to have Apple Intelligence. And I was a little bit surprised when the entry-level iPad announced last week didn't have Apple Intelligence included. And maybe that is a bit of a push, but I would imagine everything else going forward has to be able to enable some type of artificial intelligence. Let's be honest, that our Apple TVs are quite intelligent already, but not as intelligent as we want them to be.
I think that's a good way of putting it. And I agree with you. I think that iPad is a kind of an outlier because it's such a budget product. That was just a pricing decision. Apple TV in its class is not a budget product. And so I think it would need the Apple Intelligence features. You know, we've talked about what processor could be in the next Apple TV. And I think not only are they going to want to put one that's capable of Apple Intelligence, but they want to get the new graphics cores from the A17 Pro and on. So anything that includes those graphics cores is also going to be capable of running Apple Intelligence. So I think we're going to get both of those in the next hardware rev. Let's talk about our hopes for Apple Intelligence. I'll start with my first pick, which is hyper-personalized recommendations based on long-term and recent viewing history, personal context, including free time available, recommendations from contacts, time of year, and more.
Explain some of these, because, I mean, you rattled off a lot there for one pick. How would a lot of this work out on a day-to-day basis?
So what I'm thinking is the Apple TV and the TV app specifically currently offers recommendations, and some of them are really good. Every once in a while you get something in there, it's like, oh, this is just for me, which is great. But I feel like those recommendations could be more personalized based on if Apple has this graph of your personal context, they could really just focus in on what exactly you could want to watch and what exactly you're capable of watching in this moment. So what I'm thinking is you've got your recent viewing history. There's all kinds of data about, you know, what that says about what you might be interested in terms of continuing series or picking something new. For your personal context, I'm thinking about times when you sit down and you have a limited amount of time to watch. I feel like your devices can kind of surmise that based on your calendar, based on just watching habits. I mean, if you sit down in front of your Apple TV for a certain amount of time every week at the same time, I feel like Apple Intelligence could pick up on that and say, okay, you've got this block of time. Here's a film that you could fit in, so that when you're sitting down to watch, you're not spending time looking for something, but you're actually getting into something, and you're not looking at run times. You know, I do that sometimes when I have a certain amount of time. I'll look at a run time. Like, can I finish this? Because I try to finish things in one sitting if I can, rather than splitting them up. For recommendations from context, we've got shared with you, which is great, but it's still kind of siloed away from the rest of your recommendations. I feel like with personal context, Apple Intelligence could take into account, what are you and your friends chatting about? What are you all interested in, and what does that say about what you might want to watch? And it could also, rather than siloing it off, it maybe could intelligently resurface those things at ideal times for you to watch them, rather than, I feel like a lot of times things people recommend to me, I'll see them in that shared with you page, but it's not the right time, and then I end up not looping back around to them. For time of year, this is the kind of thing, you know, around Christmas, you want to watch Christmas films and things like that, and there's collections, but they're pretty generic. They're trying to hit a big group of people. I feel like there's a possibility that there's some holiday or time of year specific things that I'm missing just because I haven't heard of them that I would really love. I mean, even like Hallmark movies, that they're not maybe the most enriching things in the world, but maybe there's one out there that would be really good for me that Apple Intelligence might recommend, and I would love it. So like that's just a whole genre I've not even looked into, that I don't know that I could wade through necessarily, but if Apple Intelligence could do it for me, then I think that would be really cool. So I just feel like there's a lot that Apple Intelligence could do for the recommendation algorithm, and just turning that into hyper-focused on you based on everything that your devices know about you, and just taking that to the next level so that you're not spending so much time looking for the next thing to watch.
I love it. And the one thing probably lacking from this pick or this wish cast would probably be some way of combining what everyone in the household is watching, because if we've all got similar continue watching and watch lists and they're being ticked off at the same time, it would be cool to be able to have that shared experience, which is very much what the TV experience is in the home, right? So along with all of that, that's a great first pick. I'm going to move away from what I've got written down here because I want to kind of tie in a little bit to what you were saying. And one way in which I think that could be done, and that is automatic detection of who's watching. That's my basic idea.
Yeah.
Right? But it opens up a lot of, I think, interesting and I guess some hyperbolic ideas as well, which are way into the future, but hear me out. This automatic detection of who's watching could allow for different audio tracks or even edited versions to be played back. So, for example, you play a PG-13 TV edit of a film after an on-screen prompt if someone too young is detected in the room. We also talked previously about an automatic pause or a Gaussian blur screen filter if someone that shouldn't be watching comes into the room mid-play. But I also think that auto detection would also be helpful for accessibility. So, for example, we've talked about this a couple of times before, but neurodiverse cinema screenings are becoming more and more popular. They're also known as relaxed or sensory-friendly screenings, which are special showings that are adjusted to reduce stress and sensory input. These screenings are intended to be inclusive and welcoming for people with autism and other neurodiverse conditions. And whilst Apple have already gone above and beyond with options for turning down loud noises and higher frequencies, as well as dimming flashing lights for those that might have even epilepsy, how cool would it be if we took it a little bit further and adjusted that content automatically based on the person in the room, rather than having to, manually turn on an accessibility feature? Just make those accessibility features exist and be seamless. And there's a point I want to make a little bit later on in this. In terms of other kind of faults on people detection, you could enable or include adjusting audio output on the fly for where the person or people are watching, where they're seated in the room, which, I don't know, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. You can sit where you want, but still have the ideal listening experience. Especially
Absolutely.
with something like HomePods that can adjust, they've got all the smarts in there to kind of throw audio the way they want to. I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and then, lighting preferences and automations that are based on that particular person, maybe even home screen preferences. I know my mum's not interested in sports, so hide all the sports apps for her and show them all for me and get rid of QVC. So they're the kind of things I'd like to see, and maybe an amalgamation of both if we're in a group setting where there's a bunch of us watching at the same time. They're the kind of artificial intelligence features that I want to see brought to the TV experience. And I guess they could tie in quite well with your first pick as well.
Yeah, I think this is a great pick. And we've talked about some of these elements before because so many of the pieces are there in terms of, proximity and people having their phones and their watches, and even thinking about the U1 chip and just ways that people could be detected, but actually using that information intelligently is definitely something I think that would be a great application for Apple Intelligence. What really stuck out to me about this is you talked about the way that having to enable and disable so many of these features for a person's viewing can take forever because some of them are in the player, some of them are in the settings app, and just trying to get it set just right for each individual person can take a while. So being able to have the Apple TV adjust automatically based on who's in the room, even mid-viewing, I think that would be amazing. So I love this pick. The Apple TV I think it's unique among Apple's devices because it's the most shared. You can watch TV or play a game together on an iPad or a Mac, but for the most part, it's usually one person at a time using those devices. The Apple TV is the one where you can have one person, you can have 12 people, and having it adjust based on that, I think that would make so much sense. So, yeah, I love this pick, and I think it brings together a lot of a lot of different elements that we talked about before in a way that makes a lot of sense for Apple Intelligence. My next pick for an Apple Intelligence feature is a little bit of a different track, but one that I think a lot of people would take advantage of, and that's an expansion of the Insight feature to all content on Apple TV. So this came out last year. It's the ability with Apple Originals to see who's on screen, the actor, who they're playing, and the music that's playing, similar to Amazon Prime's X-Ray in a lot of ways. But I think with Apple Intelligence, Insight could be taken a lot further to just, rather than having to load all that information in beforehand with timestamps and, a very manual process, if it could just analyze what's on screen, throw in Shazam to recognize the music, I think that could make that feature a lot more broad and something that people would go to a lot more often because they could know that it's there and rely on it. And that could even include the ability to ask Siri to call up specific scenes and moments from films and shows, so that if you're wanting to go back and revisit something, or, I specifically, like, especially for this show, preparing, there's certain times when I need to go back and see a specific moment from a show. I may not even remember what episode it was in, but if I could just ask Apple Intelligence to pull that up for me, I feel like with the expansion of Insight, that would be possible. And a lot of people would use that not only for research, but also just to show a friend a cool scene that they saw.
Yeah, and, I hadn't really paid too much attention to Insight since it was released because of its kind of limited functionality. And, they have to start off somewhere. But I remember when Apple Music was first introduced and they talked about like a musicologist through their personal assistant. You could find out who played the drums, who produced the track. You could find out who mixed the track. All of these different things. I would love it if I could find out straight away who was the DP for this show or film. What is the lens and camera being used for this particular scene? Who designed this costume that I'm looking at? There's so much that could be brought in to Insight, and I think it would need to have some kind of Apple Intelligence element. So yeah, I love that pick, Devon.
I think it's a great idea to expand that to the creatives behind the scenes. For example, the more I learn about Shrinking and Krista Miller's role on that show, I didn't realize everything that she did, or the fact that she's married to Bill Lawrence. And so I feel like, having that kind of information available from Insight would be great too. So yeah, there's just so many like fun facts that people can learn and different people behind the scenes you could learn about from that kind of information. I think Apple Intelligence would be great for surfacing all of that while you're watching. Do you have another pick for us?
I do. Something we've talked about before, but it needed to be included. Downloads and pre-caching of TV shows and movies when clean energy is available locally. This is something that I think could probably be done without Apple Intelligence, but something I want to see. Now, you've heard about that before. I also want to just kind of talk about dynamic light dimming and home automation, based on, the time of the day and the content you're watching, that kind of thing, I think could tie in quite well, and just have the Apple TV become more of a kind of living and breathing piece of the home. Right now, it's very much like siloed into its own thing, and your TV and what you're watching doesn't really connect with the smart home at all. And I think with Apple Intelligence, we could possibly share automations, and there might be preferences that someone has at a particular time of night with these particular light bulbs in their room. And if that's becoming a thing that's being actioned again and again and again from different users all around the world, then maybe Apple can deliver that experience without us having to adjust anything and, tune in our own preferences. But, that might be against Apple's philosophy in terms of privacy and that kind of thing. But if there was a simple option to say, yep, that's fine, I'm happy to share, then I think that could help a lot of us.
I think disclosure would be important for a feature like that. when you're setting up your Apple TV, it could even say, hey, would you like to see some examples of things I could do with the lights in your room when you're watching, and kind of maybe dial those in as you're setting it up so that it doesn't just happen, unexpectedly. But I even think about something like the Hue Sync device and the app, which requires either hardware or an additional app on your TV now. But I don't see any reason why Apple Intelligence couldn't sync up with, if you have colored light bulbs and light strips in your HomeKit setup, to sync up with the content that you're watching and get that feature built in with the operating system.
Yeah, I guess it would be like an expansion to ambient lighting that's already in Apple Home, right? You just say yes and it happens. But to have that ambient lighting then work with the content you're watching would just be out of this world.
Yes. And you mentioned that some of these features could be done without Apple Intelligence. I think you could probably say that about some of the things that are currently included in Apple Intelligence. Apple's been doing machine learning features forever, but now they have this big push, this banner to put things under. It's actually an opportunity for some of these features that potentially we've been wanting to see for so long. It's like, okay, why don't you bring this to us now and put the Apple Intelligence label on it, and it'll be good for everybody. So, yeah, I think this is an opportunity for that sort of thing on the platform as well, whether the local models are necessarily super important for the feature or not. It's an opportunity to add it. Well, my last pick, and this is one that would just be a dream for me, so I'm kind of putting it out there as a wish out into the world. I don't know if this is something that's on Apple's radar or not, but something I'm constantly seeking is a schedule for my viewing. And I wonder if Apple Intelligence could do this. A personalized streaming schedule of shows and films in my Watch Next queue based on when episodes and movies release. And so this is something I've tried to put together with SQL. It's the closest I've ever gotten. And I love the way SQL lays out when episodes are coming, so you can kind of make plans based on that. But I feel like with Apple Intelligence, Apple could just do this for me. And my TV knows every Tuesday night when the series is on, I watch The Bachelor, okay? I can admit it. And it's every Tuesday about the same time. That hour and a half block of my life is dedicated to The Bachelor. So if Siri could just put together for me, we're fans of guides here, EPGs, and big proponents of that being included more. But if I could get a personalized guide of each day of the week coming up, this is what I can expect to be watching based on what the system knows about me, I think that would be cool. I'm a big planner, and we've talked before about how, as much as I may not love this about myself, I approach most things in my life as a to-do list, and that includes my up next queue. And so I like to have an idea of, especially for things that we're covering here on the show, when I can plan on watching it so that I can make sure that I'm on top of the things I need to be on top of. And I spend more time and mental energy on that than I'd probably care to admit. And if Apple Intelligence could do it for me, I think that would be an awesome feature that I would take advantage of, and maybe other people out there are like me.
I love it. And it's almost, you're asking for a entertainment concierge,
yes,
so to speak, for the week, right? Yeah, I absolutely love this idea. And this is something I would want, but I'd want like a family concierge. So, what time the kids go to bed. So this is what's going to be on afterwards. And then you have to also put in adjustments for live sports and that kind of thing as well for the sports fans. It's quite a complex thing to actually plan out, but this could be a real test for Apple Intelligence. And yeah, I absolutely love this. I wish I would have thought about it myself, but thankfully we're a team, Devon, and this isn't a competition.
No points for this one.
Now, one thing that might be a little bit controversial from one of my previous picks was the ability of, a show or a film that you're watching to be able to like dynamically change, whether that is from an accessibility point of view, whether that is from a point of view that young people don't see things that they shouldn't, or certain elements within a story or a film that could be triggering aren't shown to specific viewers. I absolutely get that that's going to be a little bit controversial, because I am also a proponent of artists and the artist's intent staying intact. But I think there is a healthy balance that could probably be found between the artist's intent and really growing an audience for that art, introducing people to things that they wouldn't otherwise have experienced. And my last pick is kind of going down the same notion, but for gaming. There is such a variety of games to choose from. That said, the difficulty of some of those games are real put-offs for someone that isn't necessarily a big gamer. I would love to see Apple Intelligence find a way of dynamically adapting the difficulty depending on the game playing history of the person playing across all titles. So maybe I'm really good at quizzes and that kind of thing, but I'm terrible at first-person shooters and beat-em-ups. Adapt that, and so I'm able to grow my skills in those different genres. But also by doing that, you're making gaming more accessible and approachable to new audiences, or to those with specific accessibility needs, without having to switch on a mode. That, I think, would just be great if, again, is that kind of context awareness of the person that's actually watching or using the Apple TV, that I really hope Apple Intelligence is able to introduce and go further in ways like this.
I think that's a really cool idea. It's a tricky problem that a lot of games try to solve themselves. You know, maybe you pick at the beginning of the game what difficulty level you want, or there's some kind of mode that you can turn on later in settings to, you know, make it easier for someone who's struggling. But to have the system automatically do that and make that not only a feature of Apple Intelligence, but also a feature of Apple Arcade, I mean, I think that's just a selling point for families, especially too. Apple Arcade is very much a service that's geared towards people with younger children who play games on their iPads or even the Apple TV with a controller. And so, you know, not having to intervene as a parent to either help the child through that level when they get frustrated or have to adjust the settings every time you switch from one player to the other, I think that would be an awesome platform feature and something that an LLM like Apple Intelligence would be able to pick up on and adjust without shaming. You know, you're just having fun. That's what a game is about. And like you said, if you're pushing up against that difficulty level, then maybe it could ease you up to the next one and slowly work your way up and improve your skills. But just making gaming accessible to more people and enjoyable, because no one likes to sit down and just lose 30 times in a row. That's not why we pay for these games. And to do that in a way that's just smooth, I think that would be awesome.
Well, there are picks for Apple Intelligence on Apple TV. We'll have to wait and see what comes, hopefully later this year, but way into the future, Devon. Let's talk a little bit nearer into the future this week with some new tvOS and iOS betas that released earlier this week, with a couple of interesting additions for both those on iOS and tvOS.
Yeah, these iOS betas, the past couple of them have been introducing some really interesting shortcuts actions for adjusting settings in different apps. And this week we got new actions for the TV app. There's a ton of different things you can change in here, including allowing a V adapter, download cellular quality, streaming wireless quality, and whether or not to use play history. I mean, there's just a ton of things that you can adjust in here. And this feels like it's building up towards that more personalized series so that you can quickly adjust things on the fly. But it also allows you to just create automations today that would simplify a lot of those things that we talked about when you're changing viewers or changing your context when you're viewing, and just quickly get things the way that you want them. So it's always great to see new actions for the TV app, and anything we can do to automate and have fun with that, we love to see. This beta also includes Siri intents for TV shows and movies. Again, we feel like that's building towards that more personalized Siri that we've heard is delayed, but they're laying the groundwork for including the TV app in that, which is obviously reassuring to see that the TV app is going to be a part of that whole system too.
Yeah, so all of these options, right? You can either get or set the option, which is very cool. But what's interesting about these Siri intents for TV shows and movies is that they're not particularly new. But they were very hit and miss in the past. So sometimes I would have to request something maybe 8 or 9 times for it to show up as an intent that I could then add to an automation. Now I request it the once, and when you go into the shortcut actions, Apple TV, you've got the settings, and then you've got other, and then you've got the most recent intent, which then you can save as an action in a shortcut, which is just blank, and then just copy that over to other automations for, just playing, I don't know, maybe Bluey, hey, just play Bluey, and it will do it. Especially handy for those in the back seat that need to be entertained, and you just need to press one button or say one command, and you're up and away, and you can concentrate on the road.
Yes, for sure. Any trick that can simplify that process, I will take. And I'm thinking now you can run shortcuts from your Apple Watch, so you could even hand the device off and then control it from your watch. And then you get the now playing widget, which I use all the time for my watch when I need to control from the back seat. So yeah, lots of little tips and tricks there. And if shortcuts with the TV app can be a part of that, that's a great addition. There's also some bits of code in the new beta that were spotted by 9to5Mac, indicating that Apple will soon require Home app users to upgrade to the new Home architecture introduced in 2022 if they haven't already done so. I know some people are holding off on that because it's not supported on older operating systems and thus older devices, but it sounds like that's going to be phased out. And if you want to continue with modern software updates on your current devices, you're going to have to upgrade that Home architecture. Now, it does come with some benefits in terms of reliability and speed. And so, there is reason to upgrade, but if you're still holding on to some of those older devices, now's probably a good time to start thinking about a plan for what you're going to do when that upgrade is required.
One thing we definitely got heads up on last week was new hardware. This continued rollout of new hardware. So, of course, we got the iPad Airs and the iPad just a couple of weeks ago now. And last week, we saw the introduction of a new MacBook Air and a new Mac Studio. So the MacBook Air is now powered by the M4 chip with 10-core CPU, up to a 10-core GPU, and up to 32 gigabytes of RAM, which just a few years ago you wouldn't have even imagined was possible in a MacBook Air. Also included is support for 2 external displays, which was one of the features that kind of pushed me towards a MacBook Pro with the M1 chips. You get 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, a 12 megapixel 1080p center stage camera, new finishes including sky blue alongside silver, starlight and midnight, which is interesting, because there's probably one of those that I would go with. You can probably guess. Starts at $999 for the 13-inch variant, and for the slightly bigger 15-inch, you're looking at $1,199. And, my next MacBook might not be a Pro. They just need to kind of up the screen quality on the MacBook Air before that happens.
Yeah, I think the screen is definitely the part of the MacBook Air most in need of an upgrade now. There's no changes to the screen here, but in terms of the overall package, this device does look incredible, and it comes with a price cut, which is amazing. The M3 MacBook Air was $100 more for each configuration, and it started with 8 gigabytes of RAM when it first came out. So you're getting a much better deal with this M4. And yeah, I love the simplicity of the lineup now with the MacBook Air and the way that Apple has really just brought that value down and made it accessible to so many people. and not made you choose between an older chip and kind of the best price. That you get both of them now. And I don't know about you, the sky blue finish looks really nice. It's subtle, but I think it looks very pretty. And I wouldn't carry a laptop that had a super bright color to it, but I could see myself carrying something like this. Are you into the sky blue at all?
I am not. Give me a red MacBook Air.
Oh, okay.
I want product red to come back to Apple products overall, actually. But yeah, give me a subtle red. I'd love it. Now, I hinted last week at the possibility of getting a more powerful Mac to be able to do some of these 3D renders that I was doing. I talked last week to the developer of Al3D, who actually gave me some recommendations towards a PC. Yes, I had to give myself a scrub. But mainly because of the NVIDIA GPUs and the way in which the program is built. That said, I was really, really looking forward to whatever the next Mac Studio would be. And, well, wonder no more, because that was also announced last week. A new Mac Studio with 2 chip options, the M4 Max, which is also seen in a MacBook Pro, with a 16-core CPU, up to 40-core GPU, and up to 128 gigabytes of RAM, and then the M3 Ultra, which is 2 M3 Max chips combined with Ultra Fusion, with up to 32 cores of CPU and up to 80 cores of GPU, with a crazy option for 512 gigabytes of RAM, which does make me start to wonder how long it's going to be until 512 gigabytes of RAM is the standard. Because things move so fast. Of course, in terms of storage, up to 16 terabytes, 4 Thunderbolt 5 ports, 6 on the M3 Ultra model. You can power up to 8 6K displays or 4 8K displays with the M3 Ultra model, and you can play up to 22 streams of 8K ProRes in 422. And, well, with all of that said, this is pretty astounding. It starts at just $1,999 for the M4 Max and $3,999 for the M3 Ultra. I hate to think what 512 gigabytes of RAM will cost and 16 terabytes of storage. But yeah, these configurations are absolutely wild.
Yeah, this Mac Studio computer just continues to astound me with every generation of how much power they can pack into that. That case it just looks like a tall Mac Mini, right? Like it's kind of amazing how much power that thing can punch. And of course, it's interesting that the 2 chip options are from different generations, that we're just now seeing the M3 Ultra, but it's just one of those things. It took longer to get it out there. And even though it is the M3 processor, it's still, the capabilities of it when you go on the higher end are just so much above anything available from anywhere else in the lineup. So yeah, this is a really impressive computer. It's way too much computer for me, but I'm happy that it's there, and it's cool to see Apple continue to push the higher end.
I also think it's a really interesting time, just a month before NAB, when we're going to get more information on Blackmagic and their Cine Ursa Immersive and the post-production workflow there and what you're going to need. I've still got one eye on this Mac Studio. And that will really be the sticking point as to whether or not I can go ahead with my plans for immersive video this year. So, yeah, it's all in the balance, Devon, but I'm glad there's at least an option now available, it would seem. Shall we take the spending down a little bit and talk about smart home? It's so accessible these days. When visiting my mum last week, I noted that she had a new security system that wasn't necessarily integrated with Apple HomeKit.
Yeah, it's always good to be safe, but in terms of smart home, it's also nice when things integrate with HomeKit and with Apple TV, which we saw this week with smart home security company Abode, which debuted its Apple TV app, giving customers the ability to arm and disarm their systems, check live camera feeds, review recorded security footage, and control connected smart home devices all on their TV screens. In addition to offering a complete tvOS experience, Abode systems also integrate with HomeKit. I've heard good things about the Abode security system. I don't currently have like a full-on security system. I've got a smart lock on my front door and a camera out there, but otherwise, not the full-on with the sensors and things like that. But Abode is one that I've definitely looked into before because of its integration with HomeKit. And now with this full-fledged tvOS app, that's another reason to give it a look.
Yeah, very, very cool. Something completely different. Apple's Sports app was updated this week to add support for the UEFA Women's Champions League, but also F1 racing. Two things that are kind of near and dear to our hearts on this podcast, given, Ted Lasso and the possibility of women's football in the still as yet confirmed next season of the show. And of course, F1. We've got a feature-length documentary coming out on Lewis Hamilton at some point down the line, who also just so happens to be the executive producer of F1, coming to cinemas in June. But the F1 season starts this weekend, and well, we've got some news.
Yeah, not only can you keep up with F1 in the Apple Sports app, but now if you're streaming F1 on F1 TV, you can do so in 4K HDR. That's really exciting. It's a part of a new premium subscription being offered by F1 TV, which for the first time lets you stream Formula One in 4K HDR and with multi-view. The stream is 4K at 50 frames per second, comes in at around 14 megabytes per second without HDR, 17 megabytes per second with HDR. The price is $130 for the season in the US. So it's cool to see the app offering 4K HDR on the Apple TV, being able to watch these races in that high quality, and with, of course, the multi-view. One thing people love about F1 is the ability to check in on different racers, get all the different camera angles, and the ability to see multiples of those at the same time. I think this is going to make for a really exciting way to watch the season from home. Do you know what's happening with this 50 frames per second deal? That strikes me as odd. It's not a frame rate I'm familiar with, especially for live sports. Do you know what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's odd because of you being in the US.
Oh.
But in Europe, it's kind of the norm. And the big thing is a lot of the F1, at least a few years ago, and I think it's still the same, the production and everything gets funneled back to Biggin Hill, which is just outside of London, not too far away from me, in fact. So everything's finished in PAL. So PAL, as opposed to NTSC, which you're used to over on that side of the Atlantic, is 50 frames per second. NTSC is 60 frames per second. And additionally, PAL is also probably the most broadly used broadcast platform in the world. So we got something right, because of course we drive on the supposed wrong side of the road. This is what I hear all the time. And of course, if you've got match frame rate already set on your Apple TV, which really the diehards probably should have, you're going to be fine anyway. So yeah, 50 frames per second, F1 TV Premium. This is a subscription that for the first time I think I'm going to join in on this year. And who knows what features may be coming to Apple Vision Pro throughout that season as well, because as we know, there was a top-down view from a third-party app using APIs that are available to developers that was withdrawn from the store. So that's all very, very cool. But in terms of app news, I wanted to give an app highlight. It's very rare that we get an Apple TV app that really, I think on tvOS, shows as much promise as this app that I was introduced to just over a week ago. It's called Swip TV, and IPTV is somewhat of a taboo subject, given that most people aren't using M3U playlists or extreme servers that they have curated for themselves. It is a category of apps that forever dominates all TV platforms, including the Apple TV. This IPTV app just does something that no other really does. IPTV, for those that aren't aware, offers the ability to serve both live broadcasts and video on demand content, and it's a distribution method I wish the likes of traditional service providers offered, like Comcast and Sky, so that their subscribers could take that content and bring it into the experience that they prefer and not the one that's being pushed to them with advertising and God knows what else. And well, SWIP TV is from a Belgium developer called Creative Mind. It is my tvOS app highlight for the week, but it's also available across iPhone, iPad, and Mac. And it sports, Devon, like such an exceptional user experience that I sent you a video a couple weekends ago just going through everything that was available. So it really kind of makes use of almost everything we'd wish traditional service providers would include in their apps for tvOS. And I just want to list a few. So you got this simple interface that is very Apple-like in so many ways, with a left bar navigation that will bring you easily to your favorite channels, movies, and series without getting lost. Then you've got easy switching between your various subscriptions, effortless iCloud syncing, which as soon as I'm in my profile and it recognizes that it's logged in with this profile with that iCloud, it just finds my stuff and displays it very quickly. Also, of course, that means it has profile support on tvOS, which is a rarity in itself. And then you've got user recommendations and customization with the ability to lock out certain channels and content from specific users, which is very, very cool. In terms of playback, it gives Dolby Vision and HDR support for both live and on-demand video. And it even has the ability to send and launch video to another player, like Infuse, which is so cool. So you can take advantage of some of the things that they're doing over there, including new AI enhancements that were just delivered to the iOS app this week. Very, very cool. You also get what we've wanted and been touting for forever from Apple, which is a full EPG alongside a global search, and again, more and more parental controls and just customization throughout. I think what's really, really interesting about this as well is I've tried many different IPTV apps, because it is a way in which I get hold of certain content from curated playlists from myself and the server that I am running. But this app in particular is actively developed. They're so transparent on their development timeline, and even publish it all in Notion, where you can see all of the requests and see what priority they are. So cool. I think this is probably going to be very close, if things continue the way they are, to being my app of the year. And we're only in March. So SWIP TV, highly recommend. The one thing that is kind of lacking right now is Plex, MB, and Jellyfin support. But that is, from what I've heard, one of the main features for the next major release, and actively being worked on right now. So very cool. I know a couple of listeners are already checking it out because I recommended it privately, but now everyone gets to hear about it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend checking this app out, just watching the videos and seeing the interface, because it looks so nice. And IPTV is not something that I was familiar with until I saw this app, and just seeing this app alone makes me want to give it a try. So I'm going to be diving more into this world soon and seeing what it's all about. But it's amazing how just an app interface can make you want to dive into a whole new world of the way of doing TV. And it's very well done and well worth a look. Now here's a question for you, Sigmund. Can you watch trailers in SWIP TV?
You can, and you can also check out a load of extras, including stuff pulled from YouTube, very much like what Plex does, which is interesting. But one trailer I know you can't check out right now because it's, of course, not released for just over a week is Bear Brick. We talked about this new animated tale around music with music from Timbaland. Looks like a lot of fun. Not something I'm chomping at the bit to check out just yet, but I think with some time with my goddaughter, I think this is going to be the perfect addition to what we watch together, coming on March 21st. But of course, this week being South by Southwest, we got 2 trailers for 2 shows that had their premieres at the festival. And we begin with The Studio. Matt is the newly appointed head of a movie studio, Continental, desperate for celebrity approval, and his executive team, who must juggle corporate demands with creative ambitions as they try to keep movies alive and relevant. Here's a small clip.
Fine is not good enough.
This is racist.
You want to bring down the studio? Why didn't you shut this party down?
Why do you keep lying?
What is wrong with you?
The job makes you stressed and panicked and miserable. But when it all comes together and you make a good movie, it's good forever.
Now, this stars and is written and directed by Seth Rogen, created by Peter Hayek, Alex Gregory, Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, and Frida Perez. Of course, the latest collaboration between Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. Also starring Catherine O'Hara, Catherine Hahn, Ike Barinholtz, who is just incredible, and Chase Sui Wonders, with guest star appearances from everyone from Bryan Cranston, Kayla Monteroso-Meyer, and Dwayne Perkins. Alongside this trailer, we got early reviews that came out to coincide with the South by Southwest premiere this last week, and they're all as complimentary as I have been whenever we've even uttered a mention of this show's name. If Severance is currently the best series return this year, you better believe The Studio is the very best original series debut so far. It's everything anyone in the movie zeitgeist would ask for and more, in my opinion. It's kind of Curb Your Enthusiasm, cringe humour, met with sublime performances from and beyond its main ensemble cast. I've had the opportunity of seeing this early, and we'll be talking and going in depth on this very, very soon on this podcast, but I just wanted to mention that I haven't laughed so hard in a long time, and that I cannot wait to talk about a few of the episodes in particular that are highlighted in this trailer. Devon, I don't know if you've also had the similar opportunity to check out any of the episodes so far, but for now, what did you think of the studio's debut trailer, and who and what are you looking forward to most about it?
Well, all I've seen is the trailer, so I'm still just going in blind so far.
Okay.
But I think this looks like an absolute knockout based on my viewing of the trailer, based on what we're hearing from critics at South by Southwest and crowd responses to the viewings there. It just sounds like this is going to be a huge hit, and that's really exciting for me. The humor that comes through in this trailer, as especially towards the end, as it's just spiraling and people are yelling at Matt and it all builds up to him getting hit by that car. I mean, that's just, I just cracked up every time I saw it. I watched the trailer multiple times because it's just so enjoyable. And in terms of who and what I'm looking forward to most, there's so many people in this, and I haven't looked at like a complete list written down anywhere because I want to be surprised. I think what I'm most looking forward to is just those moments of, wait a second, that's so-and-so, you know, just throughout the series. Of course, there's a ton of them in the trailer. Martin Scorsese is one that I'm excited about. But yeah, I just think it's amazing everyone that got involved with this show, and the way this show is it's meta, right? It's about Hollywood. And we've talked before about how the film industry is kind of on a precipice of probably some shakeups. And I feel like this is the voice and the kind of perspective that could be a part of that change. And that excites me very much as well. So I'm excited about it as a comedy, but also I really believe in Seth Rogen and his ability to do commentary through his comedy. And so I think that's going to be a huge element of this as well. And the fact that so many people are on board, I think speaks to not only him, but also what this show's going to be. And yeah, I can't wait to see it.
I have something to admit. I kind of let some other screeners kind of slide a little bit because I've watched this 3 times already. So it's so good. There's one particular episode that from a technical perspective, if it is what it says it is just out of this world and very, very funny with a great crescendo. The Studio, debuting globally March 26th following its premiere at the opening of South by Southwest last weekend.
The other big trailer we got this week for Apple Originals was Government Cheese, which also saw its premiere at South by Southwest. Set in the 1969 San Fernando Valley, Government Cheese tells the story of the Chambers, a quirky family pursuing lofty and seemingly impossible dreams, beautifully unfettered by the realities of the world. When Hampton Chambers is released from prison, his long-awaited family reunion doesn't go quite as he'd planned. During his absence, his wife Astoria and sons Einstein and Harrison have formed an unconventional family unit, and Hampton's return spins their world into chaos.
I'm not doing smash and grabs anymore. I'm on the righteous path.
A what?
This invention is my family's future.
I think you have a date.
Are you in trouble?
No.
Dreamers are dangerous.
Then consider me dangerous.
From Apple Studios and Macro Television Studios, written, executive produced, and co-showrun by Paul Hunter and Aisha Carr, starring David Oyelowo, Simone Missick, Joy Diallo Winston, Evan Ellison, and others, including John Ortiz and Adam Beach. Devon, I think this is one that is going to split opinion in terms of the trailer, but also from what was shown at South by Southwest. What were your thoughts on this? Surreal, I think, is a fair title to give it.
Yeah, surreal's a good word for it. It starts pretty conventional, but about halfway through it takes a turn into just this whole other world. And to me, it kind of gave me vibes, and maybe this is the John Ortiz element of it, I don't know, but it gave me vibes of the Bad Monkey trailer, where you watch the trailer, but you're not totally sure what you just watched or what you can expect from the show. And maybe that's a good way of setting expectations in terms of just knowing this is not going to be a traditional series. This is not going to be something that you can just grasp onto immediately and know exactly what it is. In terms of the plot and the casting, I'm excited by it. I mean, I like the idea. I'm a fan of David Oyelowo, and I think that this is a compelling story in terms of, the creative genius who comes home from prison, has this big idea, trying to make it for his family, but then he gets caught up in trouble. And we've also seen that scene before of him coming up to the yard and the kid on the pogo stick and, his wife kind of calling him out for being away for a while. And I love the vibe of that scene. So if that's kind of an indication of a little bit of the tone, I think that'll be great. But I think that I'm going to have to go into this one with an open mind in terms of not having no expectations of genre or structure, and just letting it be what it is and taking it as it is. And I think that doing the trailer this way hopefully sets the audience up for that.
Yeah, I think that's the important task of this trailer. And I really hope it's done that because, again, I had a very busy weekend. It was South by Southwest, but in London it was South by Southwest for me at least. And so I was able to check out the first couple of episodes. And I will say, in terms of the trailer and, kind of going into this series, I got very much the vibes of, I don't know if you remember it because it's from a number of years ago now on Apple TV Plus, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's Mr. Corman.
Oh yeah.
It had an audience that beloved it, but there were a lot of other people that didn't quite know what to make of it, and from a mainstream point of view, it kind of suffered from that same question of, what is it? So we'll see. But what I do love is the fact that, amongst the sci-fi and, all of the things that Apple kind of have a good hold on what's going to be successful, they're still willing to take these chances with experimental storytelling and give voices to voices that haven't really been heard before in this way. So, yeah. Government Cheese, debuting April 16th on Apple TV Plus across all of your screens. So, very, very cool.
Just a month later, we're going to get the debut of an Apple original film. That is Deaf President Now, which will make its global streaming debut on Friday, May 16th. Of course, you previously reviewed the film on the podcast following its Sundance Film Festival, but now we know when everyone will get to see it, and we'll get a chance to talk about it some more on the podcast once I'm able to see it as well. I'm very much looking forward to it. From directors Niall DeMarco and Davis Guggenheim, the feature documentary tells the story of the greatest civil rights movement most people have never heard about. Over 8 tumultuous days in 1988 at the world's only deaf university, 4 students must find a way to lead an angry mob and change the course of history. So I remember you giving this very positive marks when you got to see it at Sundance. So I'm excited that now that it's kind of made the festival circuit, we're going to be getting to see it on Apple TV Plus. Definitely mark your calendars for this one.
Yeah. Again, some incredible storytelling elements to this based on its subject matter. Very, very cool, and at times uncomfortable, but overall a really good experience. Now, it's a bit of a quiet week in terms of in-production news for Apple Originals, but we do have some casting news, and I'm going to join you this week on this. I know this is something that you normally take on yourself. Clemence Posey, whom listeners will recognise as Stella Ransom from the Essex Serpent, has joined the cast of Apple Original sci-fi series Neuromancer, starring alongside previously announced leads Callum Turner and Brianna Middleton. Really looking forward to this. I have just started to look at the graphic novels in which this is based on. The adaptation is going to be wild.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Clemence Posey, she was also on the Daryl Dixon show on AMC. So I immediately recognized her and happy to see her getting involved with Apple Originals again. The cast of Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson's Apple Original comedy series Brothers continues to grow. This time with the addition of their fictional children, played by Una Yaffe, Heidi Kwan, Nolan Almeida, Ella Grace Hilton, and Noah Carganilla. I'm curious, I would love to ask them what the process of casting your fictional family is, because these guys are playing themselves, obviously fictionalized versions of themselves, but they get to pick who their spouses and children are in this series, and that just has to be such an interesting casting process there, and getting the quote-unquote family together, but now we know who all the family cast members are going to be, at least. Finally, for casting, Jen Ha, also known as Pachinko Solomon, Laura Donnelly, and Tony Dalton will join Colin Farrell in Season 2 of Sugar, a series I know we're excited to see return, so it's cool to hear some movement there.
In other news, the Season 2 finale of Severance is fast approaching, and I hear is a kind of a feature length. So that's good, considering last week's episode and this episode, which is slightly longer, I think about 45 minutes. But the feature length finale, fast approaching, and the following day, Apple will host a screening and Q&A with the show's cast and creators at the DGA Theatre in Los Angeles. The event will be moderated by Quinta Brunson, with panelists including Ben Stiller, Dan Erickson, Adam Scott, Britt Lauer, Tremel Tillman, Zach Cherry, Jen Tullock, Michael Chernus, Daikon Leichman, Patricia Arquette, Sarah Bock, Olafur Dari Olafsson, and Gwendolyn Christie. And I think I need to get a flight for this. If only I could, Devon. Looks and sounds fantastic, and hopefully in some way this will be shared with us mere mortals that can't attend. Sounds absolutely fantastic. And lastly, on another good note, the lawsuit filed against Apple and the creators of Apple original film Tetris by journalist Dan Ackerman has concluded, with US District Judge Catherine Failer determining that the film did not copy Ackerman's 2016 book, The Tetris Effect.
Yeah, it's always a little bit tricky when you're making a film based on true events and other people have recorded those same events. But it's good to see this one cleared up. This was filed when the film came out a couple of years ago, so it's good to see it all resolved. Let's talk about some Apple TV releases. Stick with the gaming theme for just a little bit, Sigmund, because there's a lot happening in the world of Apple Arcade right now. This month's new games are now available. They include Piano Tiles 2 Plus and Crazy 8s Plus. I'm a sucker for rhythm games. I tried Piano Tiles 2 Plus. It got really hard really quickly, so I'm going to have to practice. And I could definitely benefit from some ramping down of the difficulty there if Apple Intelligence had that feature already, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. Apple Arcade also features some special updates recognizing and honoring women for last week's International Women's Day. Those games include Patterned, Drive Ahead Cascade, Wheel of Fortune Daily, Barbie Color Creations Plus, and Disney Coloring World Plus. There's a slew of new releases coming on April 3rd that were announced this week. They include a couple of series that haven't had new releases in quite some time that I think are going to be exciting. Katamari Damacy Rolling Live. That's a game that hasn't had a follow-up in 8 years, I believe. A game that holds a special place in my heart, Space Invaders, is coming to Apple Arcade with Infinity Gene Evolve. This is going to be a hybrid of the classic mixed in with some 3D elements as well. I think as you progress through the levels, you get more and more complex, which is very cool to see. Puffies is a puzzle game with a little bit of 3D elements in terms of the pieces, they have some depth to them, and it looks really cute. And then for some App Store classics, you've got Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic Plus, The Game of Life 2 Plus, and Sesame Street Mecha Builders Plus. Those are all coming to the service on April 3rd. Some other recent updates on Apple Arcade include daily missions in What the Car, 30 new levels and a new character named Iron Bird in Angry Birds Reloaded. Kind of amazing to me that Angry Birds is still coming up with new birds to add to that game after all this time. Pretty cool to see. There's a Holly celebration happening now in Temple Run Plus. And in Skate City, New York, there's 16 new challenges along with a limited run set of Mythic Quest skateboards for fans of the show.
Very, very cool. Nice tie-in there. On Wednesday, we get new episodes of Mythic Quest and Berlin ER, alongside the finale of Love You to Death, which I cannot wait to recap. I loved every moment in this love story that, did it end up being a love story? We'll find out. Friday sees the 2-episode premiere of Dope Thief, our highlight for this week. And should we have seen it already, this probably would have been a personal highlight for me. Apple Immersive Metallica makes its debut on Apple Vision Pro. Zane Lowe sat down for an interview with Lars Ulrich to announce this surprise at South by Southwest just yesterday. And I am so stoked for this. Live performances of 3 Metallica songs, Whiplash, One, and the classic Enter Sandman, recorded at Mexico City during Metallica's M72 World Tour. The second-year finale played there. The runtime of this immersive experience is on the long side for immersive experiences so far, 25 minutes. So we're seeing them slowly ramp up as we get to that feature from Bono. Shot with a custom stage plot featuring 14 Apple immersive video cameras using a mix of stabilized cameras, cable suspended cameras, and remote controlled camera dolly systems that moved around the stage. Again, the trailer's available right now. You can check out the full-length interview between Zane Lowe and Lars Ulrich, which we'll have linked in the show notes. All 3 songs also going to be available mixed in spatial audio on Apple Music this weekend. And I think that's where my excitement kind of, I need to probably sit down, because those of you, and I know there's loads of Metallica fans out there that don't have an Apple Vision Pro, you can also go in store and check out the demo version of this new experience. And yeah, I am so excited. Fun fact, Metallica actually came to watch my friends play at the Warfield in San Francisco, and then we went out for drinks. Circa, 2005. So yeah, that's a memory.
That's cool. So I guess we can say friends of the show, Metallica, have an Apple Immersive special coming out on Friday.
We also see on Friday the penultimate episode of Severance and a new episode of Surface. So lots and lots to sink your teeth and your eyes and your ears into. Alongside, of course, week 4 of MLS Season Pass on Saturday and Sunday, where there is a free game for everyone to check out.
Lots of extras to check out this week as well, including the Women's History Month collection in the TV app entitled I Am Woman, celebrating artists who embody womanhood in all its diverse, nuanced ways. Definitely check out that collection in the TV app. Few Severance extras this week, including a new Lumen management training program enforcing workplace wellness. These training programs get more and more unhinged as they go, I think. It's just kind of ramping up in terms of like the edits and just the wackiness of what's being suggested here, but they're definitely worth checking out to get a look at behind the scenes of Lumen. Also from Make 3, a very interesting article on the making of the Lumen Industries Woe Meter, which I think was turned around in like 6 weeks. It was a very quick turnaround for this device, which was practical.
Wow.
You know, you see those needles moving in last week's episode. That was a practical prop that was made, and Make 3 talks about how it was all put together, which is super cool. And then we have Severance inside the episode 208, Sweet Vitriol, to learn more about last week's episode. For Ted Lasso fans, there's always more merch, and it's great to see. This week, Homage released t-shirts for different MLS teams with the Ted Lasso Believe mark on it. So if you're an MLS fan, you want to rep your team and Ted Lasso at the same time, check out the link in the show notes to pick up a t-shirt there. Last up for extras, this is a video that you sent me, and I know you're super excited about, and that is Hugh Howe's exclusive first look at Blackmagic Design's Sena Ursa immersive camera at South by Southwest. We've been talking about this camera forever. We've seen pictures of it, seen the pre-order page where you can put a deposit down to register your interest, but this video shows it in person, and it's just so cool to see it real with the connectors and all the different ways that it works. And yeah, it's really, really exciting that they were showing it off at South by Southwest. And I think we can expect to see more of it soon, right?
Yeah, NAB next month. We'll get all of the nitty-gritty details. Now, last week, we saw the finale to a series, another Scott Free production that we've really been enjoying. It is Prime Target, about the world's greatest mind being now the most wanted, a brilliant young mathematician on the verge of a major breakthrough when he realises an unseen enemy is trying to destroy his idea, and together with a government agent who's been tracking him, he begins to unravel a troubling conspiracy.
Prime numbers are everywhere. I'm trying to find a pattern in it.
All digital locks, bank accounts, defense systems are based on randomly selecting prime numbers. If you prove they're not random, then...
It's a theory.
It's a weapon.
We've been compromised.
Some people want you dead. Other people want you alive.
If we can't stop this weapon from being created, we have to control it.
Created by Steve Thompson, produced by New Regency and Scott Free Productions, starring Leo Woodall, Quintessa Swindle, Sidney Babette, Knudsen, Martha Plimpton, David Morrissey, Ali Solomon, and others. Devon, the show seems to have become a bit of a sleeper hit for Apple TV+. Currently sitting at number 2 on the service's top 10 list and generating quite a bit of buzz. Definitely one, I think, for the mainstream, and that is a little bit of a surprise, given that, you know, we've got maths involved. Were you surprised by its success?
I think when we talked about this before, for our highlight when the series begun, I saw it as kind of something to add to the library for more of a broader appeal for casual viewers, but I wasn't expecting it to strike such a nerve with people. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people online who very excited about this one, very into it, wanting to see what happens week to week and really following along with it. I mean, hitting number 2 on the charts with everything that's happening on Apple TV Plus right now, that's a pretty big deal. And yeah, this is something that's just really connected with people. I thought it had some broader appeal, even though it wasn't perfect, but I certainly wasn't expecting it to get this big. So I was surprised by how successful it was. Pleasantly surprised, obviously, because we want to see Apple Originals break into the mainstream as much as possible. And even though my initial highlight of it and the conclusion I came to was that it was not quite perfect, it's a show that has certainly some elements to it that people are drawn to. And so I'm happy to see that. Were you surprised?
I was surprised. But then I saw the first couple of episodes and I thought, oh, okay, there might not be enough to pull me in personally and keep with it. I did keep with it. But yeah, everyone that I talked to and kind of, mentioned where I thought there were some failings, which we talked about in our highlight discussion. Everyone else seemed to kind of completely overlook and just enjoy.
Yeah.
I know certain people like myself, this would wind up just because of the lack of detail about the mathematics involved, and the encryption key, and really the details I felt needed to be there to hold this all together. But yeah, I'm wrong. So there we are.
Good on you for admitting it. I think the thing that people connected to so much with it and that they were willing to kind of overlook maybe some of its weaker points was just the conspiracy of it all. People love a good conspiracy. It's something that I'd much rather see on screen than in real life, right? So it's nice to see it play out in a fictional world. You love to see a genius underdog up against government bad guys. And when you never know what the next twist is going to be, it keeps you engaged. And for a lot of people, and I tried to get in this mindset eventually as well, you just have to try to predict what the next twist is going to be and not think about it too much other than that. And that can be a lot of fun. It's entertaining. It looks great. The show is shot in really cool locations all around the world, and it looks awesome, and it's enjoyable in that way. But I do think its biggest strength was the conspiracy plot of it all and the way those twists would come at the end of episodes, of course, to keep you hooked for the next one. And that really is what connected with people, I think, and kept everyone coming back week to week.
Yeah, I mean, the performances are great, right? The different relationships and how that unravels, I think there's a couple that I saw pretty early on which way they would go. And yeah, I would say the main protagonist isn't particularly someone that's likable in the traditional way. Quite a complex character in a lot of ways, and I thought that was very, very interesting as well. But who would have thought, because there is a fantastical element to this show, except it ended up not being fantastical, because, and I think this is one of the reasons why this gained popularity and gained traction throughout the weeks. When we're talking about encryption and encryption keys and the stability of the world, who would have imagined that whilst the government were trying to keep everything under lock and key in Prime Target, the governments in the UK and France and other places are wanting to do completely the opposite and don't quite understand the concept and the story of this show. And I would recommend that Apple PR or someone from the legal team just sends over screeners of this show to the people that are involved in the UK government, who seem to be really attacking the idea of encryption on so many different levels, and really our freedom of privacy in the United Kingdom. There are different tiers to that privacy. I think it's a human right that should stay intact. Unfortunately, the current incumbents, both in my country and in France, seem to have different ideas. And looking at it from that perspective, this is a really scary show.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't really on my radar when we first started watching it, but like you said, as the series continued to roll out, this became a very much a real world issue, and one that, while it may not be the most mainstream thing that everyone's talking about, people do care about their privacy and they may not know what encryption is, but they want their data to be protected from any party, including the government, just getting in and taking it up at a moment's notice. So,
I mean, it's a maths problem, right? So a maths equation can't decide who's good and bad and who should have what.
For sure. Yeah, there's no formula for when privacy should be broken and shouldn't, and I'm not sure that we necessarily want the government to just be able to make that decision at a moment's notice and get in. So, yeah, the show became more and more real throughout its run, and I think that definitely played into its popularity. I agree with you about some of its shortcomings. Ed, I think the thing that would have made him more likable for me would have been some backstory. There's references to something that happened with his mom in his past, but there's no actual revelation of what that is or how it plays out with him. Maybe it just leads into his kind of loner persona, but I would have liked to have seen more of that. Like you said, some parts of the mystery were a little easy to catch on to. I think we're probably thinking about similar elements here, but I feel like that actually can be a method in a mystery to give people a couple of easy ones so that they stay hooked and kind of keep trying to figure it out. So, you have a couple gimmies to pay off for people, and so they could say, yes, I was right, but then they're still continuing to think about the broader mystery. And then this entire element of math is magic, which I kind of made fun of with the trailer, but it continued throughout the series, just this idea that this guy has a formula that can basically break the world, which in some ways actually does have some pertinence to how encryption works and the way it's based on prime numbers, but I felt like it got a little bit into like mythical realm with this guy as a magician waving a wand, and math kind of being the magical language that he spoke. But I did ultimately choose to enjoy it as a fun game of enjoying the next plot twist rather than trying to analyze it as more than that on especially a character development level. And that, combined with, like you said, the performances and some of the places they went, I think it ultimately did turn into a show that I enjoyed, and I'm glad that I got to watch, and I'm glad that so many people are watching as well.
Now, do you see the potential for a second season, given the show's success and also just the state of the real world in which we live in and the real world in which Apple are predominantly involved in now?
Yeah, I would like to see a second season. I'm going to get a little bit into spoilers for the end of the show here, just in terms of what I'd like to see for the second season. It could go into dangerous territory, so maybe Apple doesn't want to touch it. But I would love to see a season of Ed with the Prime Finder going on adventures, seeing what he does with it. And because, I mean, it's basically like the ultimate superpower now that he has, right? And what can he do with it? We get a glimpse of that at the end of the series, but I'd like to see more of that. And to see him reunited with Taylor, but possibly have Taylor kind of become the double agent in the sense of she's now, within the government's control, and maybe what that could look like and how it could affect her relationship with Ed. I think that could be an interesting kind of setup for his season 2. And the thing that I wanted most out of season 1 that I would like to see in season 2 as well would be some kind of reconciliation between Jane and Taylor. Jane, played by Martha Plimpton, you shouted out her performance at the beginning of the season. Absolutely excellent. She did a great job. And that character didn't get much of an ending, I would say, in season 1. So I would love to see more of her and her relationship with Taylor in season 2. That's what I would hope for anyway. What about you?
I mean, yeah, I just want to see this storyline continue and continue until there's no need to. And it could be really interesting as well. What if encryption did break and suddenly, for different reasons, shutting down of the banking system, that kind of thing, do we go towards like a a socialist society around the world, and what effects does that have on politics and everything else. So even if it did go down that route, there's some really, really interesting ideas and alternate realities that we could explore. But yeah, for now, Prime Target's first season is available in its entirety to stream on Apple TV Plus across all of your screens. And well, that leads us to some TV app highlights to add to your watch lists this week. Starting with some movies, Better Man, the story of UK pop sensation Robbie Williams, who for this dramatisation is replaced by a monkey, is now available on PVOD. Alongside Every Little Thing, this is from director Sally Aitken, and comes a delightful look at Terry Mazer, a Los Angelian who finds herself on a transformative journey as she nurtures wounded hummingbirds, unravelling a magical tale of love, fragility, healing, and the delicate beauty in tiny acts of greatness. Truly a meditative and brilliant film, and a great highlight on this International Women's Month. I also wanted to mention I'm Still Here, which stars 2025 Academy Award nominee Fernanda Torres, which sees Eunice Paver beginning a lonely battle to learn the truth behind the disappearance of her husband, former PTB deputy Rubens Paver, whilst trying to keep her family together, starting in 1970s occupied Brazil. Next is Liza, a truly terrific, absolutely true story, which is rich with archival gems and Liza Minnelli's own point of view. Bruce David Klein's luminous documentary celebrates a young entertainer full of boundless raw talent and the deep creative relationships with her mentors and influences. And today also sees the Disney Plus debut of Mona 2, starring The Rock, and Killer's Game on Stars, starring Dave Bautista, so too for the wrestling fans amongst you. And on Thursday, we see the debut of Hulu psychological thriller Control Freak, about a motivational speaker plagued by an itch on her head that soon becomes infected with a parasitic demon from her homeland. Followed by Max, with their debut of its horror comedy, The Parenting, with an ensemble cast including Succession's Brian Cox, about a young couple whose Meet the Parents weekend at a cosy rental house turns into a haunting from a 400-year-old poltergeist. And lastly, on Friday we see the VOD debut of Jimmy Warden's horror comedy Borderline, from the writer of Cocaine Bear, about a helplessly romantic sociopath who escapes a mental institution and invades the home of a 90s pop superstar. And on Netflix, and you know, I say this through gritted teeth, but it has to be mentioned, original film The Electric State makes its debut. It's directed by the Russo brothers, of course the directors of Apple original film Cherry, and stars Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt amongst a never-ending who's who of modern-day Hollywood, set in a retro-futuristic past. Orphan teenager Michelle traverses the American West with an eccentric drifter and a sweet but mysterious robot in search of her younger brother. Something for everyone, I think, this week. But if that still wasn't enough, we do have, of course, some up next picks. What have you got for us, Devon?
Mine's a theatrical pick this week, because this weekend sees the debut of The Day the Earth Blew Up. This is the newest Looney Tunes full-length film. It's actually the first modern-day animated Looney Tunes film to receive this sort of international theatrical release. Of course, you've got your Space Jams, but it's cool to see fully animated coming to theaters and seeing Warner Brothers Discovery making this investment in the film, which is awesome. And from everything I've heard, this one's a lot of fun. It's a great movie to go out to the theaters with the family to go see. It follows Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and Petunia Pig, who have to save the Earth from mind-controlling aliens. And of course, it's Looney Tunes, so it's got all the antics you can expect, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of laughs along the way. So this one looks like fun. I grew up loving Looney Tunes. Anytime I see clips of it, when I'm passing by a TV or see them on social media, I always got to stop and watch my Bugs Bunny, my Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, and seeing them in theaters now, I think it's really cool. And the staying power of that franchise is just amazing, the way it's still relevant in 2025.
Very, very cool. My up next pick this week, it was a few, but they're all Metallica related. I'm that excited. Metallica Through the Never 3D from Nimrod Atau, who was also the director of Vacancy. Very, very cool there. About a young roadie for Metallica who's sent on an urgent mission during the band's show, but then the simple assignment turns into a surreal adventure, and it's really, really quite a special experience. I know it's available in 2D in the Apple TV app, but if you can, hunt down the 3D Blu-ray. In terms of just pure concerts from Metallica, there are so many to list, but a couple of favourites from my collection are Francis Pour un Huit from France and S&M with the San Francisco Symphonic Orchestra, which is far less painful and crude than it sounds, Devon. So yeah, S&M, great concert there from Metallica. And honestly, we'll say it again, find your way to an Apple store this weekend and experience Metallica Immersive on Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, I can't wait. And these concerts are a great way to kind of get ready for it. And it's a great time to be a Metallica fan. It's a great time to be a fan of immersive video. That's what we have for you this week. Thanks so much to everyone for listening. We appreciate you joining us every week. And of course, we'd always love to hear what you're thinking. So you can contact us on social media via the links in the show notes. Or you can email the show or send us an iMessage to magic@macstories.net. We would love to hear from you.
We'll be back next week with a heartfelt look back at Love You to Death. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with the ever-changing world of Apple TV. So until then, stay safe, watch some Apple TV, play some Apple Arcade, headbang, but maybe not too much whilst wearing that Apple Vision Pro, and have a great week.